This afternoon, Todd Blanche, the president's former personal criminal defense attorney, will be sworn in as the 88th U.S. Attorney General of the United States. His confirmation was an uphill battle, and here's what he's facing, according to the Washington Post. Blanche will begin his role under competing pressures from a president intent on seeing his enemies put on trial, a federal judiciary increasingly skeptical of those efforts, and a Republican-led Congress harboring growing doubts about Blanche's ability to say no to his boss. The group chat is still here. Nikki, I want your take on what to brace for next.
I'm sorry, the notion that Republicans are harboring doubts, quote unquote doubts about Blanche, it's incredibly obvious what he was brought in to do. You look at what happened to Pam Bondi. She was ousted from her position for not delivering on that list of demands that was just laid out. Trump wants revenge, wants immunity, wants clearance to kind of operate at will without regard to actual Congress or the courts. Blanche's confirmation is another step into the Trump administration restructuring the Justice Department as Trump's personal law firm. We saw in the not so transparent negotiations about his confirmation, all these concerns about the slush fund for January 6 defendants, for IRS immunity for himself and his children.
The treatment of Epstein survivors.
Exactly. And it seems like Blanche wrote on a slip of paper that he didn't sign with his fingers crossed behind his back, like, yeah, I won't do any of that. And the administration is already signaling that they expect those things to be delivered on. And I think what I'm sitting with is, you and I have talked about this on the past, on other shows, this idea that there's now this YOLO caucus of Republicans who lost their primaries, are kind of lame ducks, who were going to act as checks to the president. This was the first test. They absolutely failed it. Cassidy, every Republican who kind of sat there and wrung their hands and thought about like, oh, well, I need these guarantees, caved. And this really was, in the end, a last gift to Trump before they leave office, telling them, not only am I going to give them an attorney that is MAGA, an attorney general that is MAGA, I'm going to give one that worked for you, that defended you against the very people that you are now looking to prosecute. I'm going to let the fox into the henhouse. And that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Hayes, I mean, for someone like Bill Cassidy, trying to get into their mind about why they would do this at a time when technically they do not owe President Trump anything anymore in D.C. It was interesting to watch him yesterday on the Sunday shows. He was sort of like mumbling through, being like, I'm about as optimistic about the future as you can be, when asked about what is to come with Blanche.
Yeah, I think that you're completely right. They caved entirely, this supposed YOLO caucus. Like the fact that Cornyn and Tillis were saying, oh, we want you to rescind the slush fund order, which Blanche did too. He could just put that right back into place. There's no law say against it. The Republicans in the Senate have blocked that several times now. They didn't go after the IRS fund, which would have been the more challenging and more, I think, more directly affecting the president himself. So they didn't even bother trying to get Blanche to say, no, we're going to pull that back too. We have it now so that Cassidy, I think, I'm trying to get into his head, because the only reason to do something like this is...
You look like you're like trying to astral project there.
I'm in Louisiana. I really think that the only reason for him to do this, because he wants there to be someone who is firmly Republican and to have the stability of having a full attorney general in, and knowing that whoever they nominate to any other nominee would be probably nearly as bad as Blanche, let's say, and that Blanche could still work as acting. And if he were to come out and say, look, I know that we don't have the cards here because Blanche will still be there in acting capacity. He still was senator confirmed. He will still have all of these powers, and whoever Trump nominates will be worse. So I decided to push forward on this so that we can move on to the next fight. If he had said that, much more interesting than Louisiana mumbles.
Fair enough. Okay. So, Abby, Blanche was asked about some of this with reporters the other day about what is coming on the road ahead. I want you to take a listen.
It's not as if I remain blissfully unaware of what will happen if I'm confirmed. President Trump, when he talks about what he expects this department to do to make this country safe, I don't think the American people should look at that as some sort of threat to me or warning to me.
What are you going to be watching for from him?
I think the most interesting thing about the Justice Department over the next few years is that we are entering into a climate where Donald Trump is a lame duck. And so that this is not the same moment as when Pam Bondi came in this kind of bullying atmosphere. And the question I have is this tension about lawyers. Is the purge in the Justice Department over? Has everyone who's left is going to leave? Or are we going to see more lawyers like Jeanine Pirro who have a regard for the American Bar Association and maybe want to hesitate before they start doing things that might end their careers? And, you know, Trump's only going to be there for about another 2.5 years. So how much is that worth?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Jeanine Pirro, she is in hot water with this president over her failed efforts to go after someone for these sort of baseless claims about vandalism in the reflecting pool. What do you think her example tells us?
I mean, I think they did send her out in a very humiliating way when she left the White House, but I think she stood up, and it's the first time we've seen that in a while since the first pass of lawyers leaving the department. So I think it's anyone's guess, but I do think it's something we haven't seen in a while.
I'm curious, Nikki, how you see this moment. One of the things that I've been thinking about, and I don't want to sound like I'm putting a tinfoil hat on here, but watching all these different pieces, I understand that he's a lame duck. At the same time, there's still a lot this president can and we know wants to do. You have Kash Patel saying he's going to Russia in October, right before the midterm elections. And then you have Blanche, who's going to be in there. And there's already an open question about what role he may play if this president does not like the results come early November. What do you see on the horizon there?
I mean, I do think the selections of cabinet replacements he made over the course of the last 3-4 months, particularly replacing Gabbard and then Todd Blanche, does indicate to me that there is some sort of preparation to level electoral challenges. We saw after Michigan. We saw in California that the Republican Party has been agitating in these primaries about, oh, there was fraud here. The candidate that we wanted to win didn't win. I think the playbook we're going to see, and we've seen it a lot experimented in Georgia, there's been wonderful reporting on sort of how the Republican Party is sandboxing electoral interference strategies in Georgia. We're seeing an election structure that is prepared, maybe not necessarily to outright cancel the midterms. I don't think that's going to happen, but they are preparing to level the electoral challenges. We saw last year, House Speaker Mike Johnson refused to see Arizona Representative Adelita Grijalva for 3 months.
Yep.
That is the sort of hand in the cookie jar interference that I expect. I think we're going to see a lot of state level action. And I think the people that are being put in place, particularly Todd Blanche, and oh my God, I'm forgetting the name of the new DNI. Gabbard's replacement.
Clayton.
Oh, Clayton. Yeah,
Yes. Clayton, with sort of the raids that took place in the Fulton County election office, I think we're seeing these figures kind of move into position should Trump push for state level electoral challenges.
And are Democrats going to be ready, Hayes?
That's a great question. I have no idea. I think that they're going to be ready to face whatever court challenges arise, whether they're able to face whatever sort of shenanigans happen through the Justice Department. One thing that I'm worried about that could happen is the DOJ only, part of 2020 was trying to get the DOJ to say that there has been fraud enough that to get state legislatures to act in terms of the Electoral College. I'm thinking about the fact that it is members of the House who get to decide whether a member should be seated or not.
Yeah.
And in a close election, I feel like it might be a situation where if the DOJ comes out and says, well, there might have been fraud in this election, does Mike Johnson tell his members, well, then if there's any hint of impropriety, we should not seat that member until this has been worked out, and then just continue working that way? That, I feel like, is a situation that we're not prepared for in this country.
And it's a sad state of affairs. We have to run these exercises through our minds right now.